So welcome to the CHAOSS Community Weekly Call. I have a few things on the agenda today. So if you could add your name and tell us how you're doing today, that would be great. I don't know whether that's from Dawn or Sean.
What?
The unicorn failures.
The what?
Unicorn failures?
I didn't put unicorn failures in mine on
Whoops,
purpose.
GitHub's having all kinds of issues, but one of the failure pages is this really angry looking unicorn.
Oh, that is their failure. I love that about GitHub.
Yeah.
My developers were just asking about it. So.
Yep, because I was just trying to. I think Matt, your pull request merged, and then I realized Kevin had also submitted a pull request with the exact same change.
Oh.
And so I'm trying to close Kevin's without merge, but that isn't working because of GitHub not working. I like 10 minutes before this meeting, and I was like, I'm gonna do the pull requests. Nope.
Well, it's the thought that counts. Okay, cool. So here are a few of you can kind of see I've jotted down a few things on here, and of course, as people want to add things or bring things up, that is absolutely fantastic. So I think the first thing that I want to talk about, or just kind of keep people posted on, is we have the CHAOSS Community Manager position posted now to Indeed. I did change the title of the position just a little bit to include remote work, because we were getting that question a fair amount. We have to advertise it just in a single city without pay. I think we just posted it on Friday or Saturday is when it ended up getting posted. I'd say we have about 60 applicants.
60?
Whoa. Now, this is not like, not everybody is a good, they qualify well for the position. So if you could all help, that would be great to continue to get the word out. I'd love to broadcast this as widely as possible to get the best possible candidates for the job. So please take a second and just either retweet the CHAOSS project tweet or send it out on different lists, or however you want to get it out there. Much appreciated. I did reach out to the Linux Foundation. They don't tweet out job postings. So thought I'd ask. It didn't happen.
This is fairly common, though. Every time I've tried to hire a community manager, the number of just unqualified candidates compared to what we're looking for, especially for open source community managers, because you get all kinds of people who know how to tweet and do Facebook and who manage like leasing communities of apartment buildings. You get all kinds of crazy applicants for community manager positions that are just not.
You got it. That's exactly.
It's such a large buzzword that it's become almost too general now.
It is. So the other one was we had put in there engagement with open source or something like that. A lot of people are it's like using open source software versus actually participating in open source projects. So that's getting collapsed a little bit too. So no, totally agreed.
Did you change that question about open source?
I didn't at the moment. I didn't have time this morning. I just changed the title to indicate that this is remote work. So if you want to change that question, feel free. Does anybody have any questions on this? Still just super excited. I'm just super excited this is going to happen. And as always, thanks to the Alfred Sloan Foundation for providing support to actually allow this to happen. So this is great. So the next thing that I had, it was something that we had on the schedule for last week, but we just ran out of time. So this was put together. If you can see, I can share my screen real briefly. So sure how well. So this was a group of folks that was King, who joins the calls regularly, who's in, I think he's at Huawei, was trying to think through the issue metrics. I haven't looked in this in a lot of detail, but he was suggesting that there was just trying to get their head around how issue metrics are understood. So I thought a chart like this could be useful. Again, I don't know if this chart is correct. I don't know if people have thoughts on this, because we have a lot of like time to close, how long an issue is, I don't know, whatever we have in here. Issue closed, new issue, issue response time, resolution duration. I'll give you a second to take a look at that.
I'm not going to say I fully comprehend it yet, but I'll throw out there that it, like visualizing how they relate to each other and the interrelation of them. And also, I love that they're annotated as, you know, ratios versus median. Like this is, it looks quite nice to me from that angle. But yeah, not comprehending all of it just yet.
Like, what does this, is this perfect or is this not perfect? You only have like a minute to look at it, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I guess, are these metrics that we already have?
Yeah, so these are, I think these are metrics that they were trying to work off of on the release. And I'm with Matt, that being able to visualize the relationship between different issue metrics, or being able to visualize between different, say, pull request metrics, because it's kind of in that same category, might be a useful exercise to do. We don't have to do it now, but might be a useful exercise to do at some point, to try to think about what these metrics mean in relation to one another.
I mean, in the work I've done directly with people, the ways that folks look at these things in combination are really different, depending on what problem they're trying to solve or what question they have. So a good example is tagging and commenting. That is like, those are two different signals to some people. Issue response time. Some organizations are starting to use bots, and so it's, let's filter out the bot response and look at the first time an actual human responded to it. So just in practice, I mean, I think that this is a good collection of metrics around issues. And I think the applications of them are, I'm just pointing out a few nuances in the way that they get applied.
Yeah. So if I take a look at, say, you can see my cursor, that like kind of this issue age right here. So is that a way to think about issue age, that the open and closing of an issue constitutes its age, and then the reopening and the closure constitutes its age?
I think as a practical matter, the easier way to handle it, the way I've provided data for people is, okay, here is your first close date, and here is your last close date, or here's the length of time between when it was opened and first closed, and the length of time between when it was opened and last closed. So it would be considerably more programming effort to, and probably not incredibly valuable, because the number of issues that are opened and closed many times, at least in those projects I've looked at, is very small.
Okay.
So
I'll come at this a different way. This was put together by a group of folks who were trying to look at the metrics that had been released from CHAOSS, and this is how they kind of observed the relationship between the metrics. So this is the message that they're getting. as a group. So it'd be like if a group of 5 of us sat down, took the released metrics and said, how do these all fit together? So if I'm going to be looking at, say, issue resolution duration, this is, from what I understand, from reading the documents, this is what I understand it to be, which is this bottom part right down here. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
If
and
not,
I don't think this is wrong.
okay,
I mean,
that's good.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's wrong. I think
Would
there's
it be better to clarify it as a life cycle? So you have open close 1, open close 2 in a life cycle where the entire issue is expected to open this many times.
Yep. Georg, were you going to say something too?
Oh, I was only half listening, so I don't know if someone else already.
That was very honest, Georg. I appreciate that.
Yes, I'm homeschooling here.
Yeah.
The issue age, that's the only one that I would start from the beginning always. And the difference between issue age and issue resolution is that issue age always applies and resolution only applies once it's closed.
Okay. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I thought it was a nice exercise by a group of people trying to get their head around metrics who aren't necessarily involved in the development of those metrics. So I think this is one of the first visuals that I'm seeing that is how people are observing these metrics.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Hey, Saleh on the line had something you wanted to speak up. Go for it.
Sorry, I'm kind of in interruption mode today. Every time I try to talk, I'm interrupting someone, so I do apologize. Let me give a different angle because we're talking about community health. I happen to be, okay, let's not use the I, okay. Some people happen to be edge cases when it comes to systematic things like issues. Take my word for it. There are several patterns where issues become nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. When we talk about issue age, we're saying the typical issue that will be opened, resolved, and closed, or the typical issue that will be opened and basically one of 3 things: either it's a duplicate, or it's out of scope, or it's not an issue, like works as expected, when it's actually that. I think if we're talking about looking at the health of a community issue-wise, we should kind of look into issues that really kind of went far beyond the typical. I have a bunch of examples. Just look my username on GitHub. I guess I was just, creating sample data for everyone. But I have issues that, go for years. And basically I don't get except a few labels here and there. And the bot that keeps telling me we'll close it now. And I'm like, no. So there are patterns for issues that basically become nightmares. And those are issues that get called a duplicate just because they're not understood, or closed, and another issue is opened by a more preferred way to frame it by the project. These are problems in open source because you lose the traceability, or you lose the originator of the issue. And I think those all factor into the age. They factor into what you call a resolved issue. And hopefully now GitHub is getting a different name for that. Like there are some that are going to be bugs, some will be discussion. So I think we want to take the angle of when issues go right and when issues go wrong. Yeah, sorry about that.
I tried to jot it down. I thought that was a nice, right. This is under the assumption that there's a single issue open, a single issue commented on, and a single issue closed. And that issue kind of lives in isolation. And that there's not a second issue opened along the same lines.
Right.
It does not account for that. So it's a point well taken.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you could ask those questions. I think the discrete metrics that we're building are, right now we're building metrics, I think, at a level that is very discrete and succinct. And answering questions or trying to identify behavior like you described, I think that couldn't be done using a number of the metrics pulled together. Maybe what's missing is some kind of similarity checking to see when issues are actually similar to each other. Um, I think different projects have patterns of, they just quickly decide something's not something they're interested in including. So if it's a feature request, they just get rid of it and close it. And if somebody really wants it, they might reopen it. I think if something's a bug, maybe they don't want to publicly acknowledge that bug, so they close it. I think there are different cultures on open source projects that treat issues in different ways.
And I think communication barrier sadly treats issues in a completely different way.
Yeah.
You know, people prefer to take issues that they, you know, feel they can do something about. And I mean, that's good, but I mean, it's kind of like discrimination, but it's not. It's for the right reason. People want to stay engaged and motivated to work, and so it's a gap in issues. You know, if your issue doesn't sound like people are used to, it doesn't go far. And maybe that means we just want to have a metric of saying how many issues were typical. I don't want to use that word. That's kind of like very, but normal is not right. Edge case is very offensive for the others. But yeah, so somewhere there, like, you know, the percent of issues that are closed because they were read and they made sense to be closed, I think it's different from, you know, just push aside or.
Hey, want to throw out there to pass it back to you, Matt. Matt G, is this the kind of feedback you're looking for? Is there a particular follow-up action to this that would be helpful?
Yeah. So thank you. I guess part of it is something like this useful? I mean, to me, it is. So when I see people trying to use metrics in ways or get their head around metrics, so is this something we should ever provide community? Like, here's an example visual of how metrics or issue metrics might be understood collectively. We could put a disclaimer. Here's an example of how pull request metrics might be understood collectively. So
yeah, like the interrelation of themed metrics.
Useful.
In my opinion,
I think those would be, sorry.
I'm sorry. In my opinion, universally, yes. I think that visualizing processes in a more standard manner is always going to improve people's reception of your standards. So, yes.
Cool, thank you. And Georg, I saw you mentioned the blog post.
Yes, I would love to see this as a blog post on the CHAOSS website.
And you can easily splinter this into a whole bunch of other content as well, which may not only make it a little bit easier, but it will also help you stand out a lot better.
Cool.
Can we focus this kind of visualization on the focus group area? Like in each working group, we have a different focus area. So can we visualize a bunch of metrics in that focus area?
Yeah, so I was thinking this, right, while this conversation was going on too. I think focus areas like around issues or pull requests might kind of lend themselves to thinking about how those specific metrics are related directly to one another. Versus other focus group areas, I think the collection of them, not necessarily the relationship between them, that helps define the focus area. So I think some focus areas might be inclined for this type of visualization, and other focus areas perhaps a little bit less so. Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, like pull requests probably you could draw some
exactly.
for. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Great, thank you. I'm gonna move down to website stuff. Kevin is on the call.
Yes.
So, also, any web updates or things you want to talk about? Continuous contribution.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up a bit.
Do you have updates to the website that you want to talk about with respect to the continuous metric contributions?
Certainly. Yeah. So Georg and myself were working through edits to the release process in the government's document. So though most of the edits have been pushed, I updated. Actually, made some more edits to that document today, and then I have gone through and I have basically pushed the release through for the new common metric. So the only thing that we were waiting for to go live on the website was the note to get added to the new metric repository page, so which I think you and I both had a commit to address that. So at this point, I can push a button and basically have it go live anytime.
Right on, thank you. Where are we at? Doesn't Evolution have one as well, Kevin?
I believe so, but I'm not completely certain where we're at on that. I think there was some discussion about whether or not it was ready. Is that correct, Sean?
Which metric was that?
So there was one metric that it had gone through the comment period, and then edits were made to it. And I'm not sure if it's ready for release now or not in Evolution. Let me see which one that was.
I believe it did go through the review process, and the question was, how do we get it on the website? And so now that we solved it for the common metric, we can replicate that same process for the evolution metric.
Yeah, I think that was the intent, that we held off until we discussed it in this group and resolved it. So,
are you sure there wasn't another issue?
There was one where there was a modification to an existing metric, and I don't recall specifically, but what I think I remember is that we are not going to release the modifications to existing metrics, that those would go through a regular review period.
That's right.
That, they would just wait until the regular review period.
Okay. Anything else on that, Kevin? Thank you for doing that.
No. The only thing I would say is, Sean, can you drop me a note just letting me know which metric it is?
Okay. Yeah, I'll figure that out. Of course, I probably won't be able to figure it out right now.
That's okay.
Let's see if GitHub brought me to this page.
All right. Anything else on this? Thanks, Kevin. A couple other things I have on the list here. So we've talked about this. So I'm just going to ask people about a Slack channel. So we've talked about Slack channels in the past for CHAOSS. Ultimately, I think we kind of decided against an official CHAOSS Slack channel because, in large part, I think because we can't record it. Georg, you can remind me of the conversation.
So there are several open source communities that have used Slack in the past, and just looking at them, we have decided previously that Slack is a proprietary tool that does not allow you to keep a history of what is being said unless you pay for it. If the community grows too much, you have a limit of 10,000 messages that you can see. And so especially larger projects might not be a problem for CHAOSS, but larger projects have a problem that you only see in each channel the last 10 messages or so, and you miss a lot. Also, Slack is not built for communities, it's built for corporations, so there are no community management features around enforcing code of conduct and or just moderating what is happening. And
administrators can moderate, administrators can delete.
You can't block, you can't mute individuals, and you can't easily monitor direct messages to people.
No, direct messaging is that's
yeah, I guess there's kind of two questions that I tend to like to break out. It's like, do we need a synchronous communication site for some reason, like where we can real-time chat with each other? And then if the answer is yes to that, like, is Slack the right answer versus Discord or IRC or whatever other channel? So I'd be curious, like, it sounds like the answer has been no to a need for synchronous communication. And then there's, you know, a secondary no of Slack. So maybe it'd be helpful to have those two separate. What are your thoughts, Vanya?
So this has kind of been discussed a lot in the community management field, primarily because Slack did not intend for their services to be used the way that they are, but there are a lot of things coming in the pipeline because Slack does see that their application is being used far beyond its capacities. But with that, there have also been a few other options like Mattermost coming out, and its integration with Discourse, which is another system that I hugely recommend. So I would recommend doing a Mattermost Discourse combo instead of a Slack necessarily. Still, I have noted, and my partner Celine and I were actually talking about this just recently, asynchronous communication and synchronous communication are kind of this dialectical tension that a lot of people are like, okay, if you do one, people get tired and they don't necessarily want to reproduce that conversation in the other. So if you start adding asynchronous communication, people stop coming to meetings, but those meetings are also kind of limiting the scope of who can or cannot participate. So what a lot of people have done is they've created meeting archives that are interactable via Discourse, and then they have a chat system attached to that, Mattermost, on the bottom of the video meeting. So essentially what that looks like is we have this meeting, it's recorded, goes onto YouTube, you start a new thread on Discourse, Discourse has a conversation about it, and if anyone wants to make that a part of their discussion asynchronously, they can go into a Mattermost channel to do it.
So there were two things. Sala, you raised your hand. You did have a question. Mattermost plus Discourse, is that was directly?
I was just writing what Samantha said, and I'm not in the document, I'm in the chat, sorry. Okay. I should write in the doc.
Okay, Sala had his hand up.
Yeah, so I think what Slack has shown recently with the OpenJS Foundation is it really allowed, so OpenJS is the umbrella with Node.js and JSF, right? And they kind of have like a very, very big base of people who basically try through GitHub to find a place in a project to collaborate. So one of the teams I'm actively engaged in is the website redesign team. And we've had this idea of using Slack before with Node.js, and OpenJS came and said, okay, let's make it like a subscription-based for every OpenJS project. And there's like this huge community. But for the Node.js website, we really manage the front end, which is GitHub issues and bi-weekly meeting. We talk around how we want to manage the project in Slack. There's also integration that allows us to Zoom, that allows us to GitHub, and calendar events. So everything related to the project comes into that one dashboard. Just the last bit is, I believe, from my perspective, if people are affected by friction in certain applications, I've tried them all. And for me, the least friction is with Slack. You know, I'm going to be honest, I have friction following the mailing list, opening email, even GitHub notifications. And basically when I need to like make sure I'm not losing sight of what I need to do now, Slack gives me that ability to even reach out to a person and stay on top of my you know, otherwise very chaotic mess of notifications and, you know, alarms and, you know, people yelling and stuff. So yeah, thanks.
Sean?
Yeah, I'll just on the question of cost, if you have a .edu account, you can get significantly discounted Slack. Like, so I'm paying like, I have 53 users in one of my classes right now, and I think it's costing me like, I don't know, like not that much money, maybe $60 a month or something like that. And so the cost hasn't been a big issue for me. Slack, and it could be Slack or it could be this Mattermost, just another tool. But for me, my email is overwhelming, and so mailing lists, like I put a lot of rules in and I try to get to the CHAOSS stuff, but it is, I get so much email because I teach large classes, and my university likes to send emails to everyone. So like anything other than email is, I vote in favor of. I don't care what it is, but something besides email is always a better way to find me, and always a better way for me to get engaged there. I guess I'm a little better with email now that I'm stuck at home all day. but you know, email is like something, I don't know. I'm not. I like anything better than anything. To me is better than email.
All right. There are some. If you haven't had a chance, take a look at the chat as well, because there are some really nice comments in the chat that people have as well. And I know, Gary, you were trying to move that over to the document.
I think I've moved most of it over.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that was probably my fault.
No,
I'll work on the document from now on.
we'll capture it.
I definitely helped. I mean, a short version for one of the communities I manage, I migrated people off of a semi-active IRC that people were getting frustrated because they were in different time zones, and 4 mailing lists, and merged them into a single discourse. And then you can use different topics as different mailing list subscriptions. So per topic is basically its own mailing list, but whenever somebody responds to the mailing list, it goes to discourse as well. So it's kind of like choose your own interface to participate. It's wonderful. It is a ton of work to get off the ground, but once it's there, it's not too much more administration.
A ton of work from my.
Like it took me like probably like 1 week of paying primary attention to that, to deactivate stuff, get people migrated over, get the topic set up correctly, and start documenting things. And then like another week or two of tidying that up as we learned how, like what patterns we actually needed. So it just takes a community manager type of work with some technology skills, because Discourse is really powerful in what it lets you configure. Yeah.
And so if somebody replies in email, it gets posted on Discourse. And if somebody replies in Discourse, it gets posted on the mailing list. And the two are always identical?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if we could
it's
do
like
that, I would be okay with it. We've had this discussion a bunch of times in this call, and my concern has always been that what I don't want, and I've seen this happen in too many communities, where you've got people who use some sort of forums, you've got people who use the mailing list, and they are rarely the same people. So you get two completely separate discussions about the project happening in different forums, and that's what I'd like to avoid. I mean, and I sort of have a love-hate relationship with Slack, because on the one hand, it's really nice to be able to ping people and get an immediate sort of answer, but being in a different time zone from a lot of the people that I work with, I just look at Slack in the morning, and I read back in a couple of the important like team channels, and it's like, oh well, they had this big discussion, but it's kind of over and I'm too late.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I don't know what to do with that. The asynchronous bit is hard for me.
So there is some work that's kind of already been done where you can have a conversation in Mattermost, and then over that conversation, someone with admin privileges or something like that can create a thread in discourse using a specific set in Mattermost, and that synchronous conversation moves into a thread for asynchronous conversation later in discourse. So Mattermost can integrate kind of with discourse to create that thread and allow for asynchronous input.
Yeah, but it's less that. It's more like the conversation reached a natural conclusion. You know what I mean? I just didn't happen to be part of it because I wasn't awake.
Yeah.
So like chiming in later feels weird because I'm like, oh, they've already, you know, resolved this, and now I'm just like adding random commentary.
Yeah, the cultural aspects of asynchronous response to a synchronous conversation is kind of difficult, but I mean, there are solutions outside of technology that might be able to solve that, like implementing a culture of continued conversation where people are like, yeah, this seems important enough that we should probably pop it into a thread. And then they just tag the community manager, and the community manager runs the script to pop that conversation into discourse.
So Sean, you had a comment?
No, I think my hand was raised from earlier.
Oh.
I guess I'd need to lower my hand explicitly.
You do.
I would like to make a suggestion. So we've had this conversation multiple times, but I think we should table it, and then not have it again, but have it again once we actually have a community manager on board, because I think it's important for the community manager to be an integral part of this conversation.
Yep, totally fair. Yep. All right, cool. Yeah, it had been a while since we had the conversation, so I figured you know, it's not always a terrible thing to reflect on. And it does make me wonder, I mean, listening to everybody here on these calls, and our calls are getting, they have more participants if you haven't noticed, and I'm wondering, like, part of me just wonders, not even on channels, but are we actually having a problem getting the work done based on the way that we're working now too? And if the answer is no, then changing anything may not be an issue. So are we keeping people out? Are we, I don't know. All right, cool, thank you. The next thing that I had was the metrics repository. So this is this gives me a headache. So we have in GitHub, we have a lot of repositories, and a number of the repositories are dedicated to, say, software. The repositories are dedicated to the working groups, right? So value and DNI and common and evolution, all that kind of stuff. And we have this in governance, we have a repository dedicated for governance, and we have this repository called metrics. And it's a high profile repository because it's named metrics. So it kind of sits
yeah, it's got a good name for getting attention.
Yeah, right. I mean, seeing that's kind of one of the things that we do. And it's an old repository. It was a repository that we originally created as a way to just kind of capture all metrics long before we were doing any of the working groups and all these focus areas and all that kind of stuff. So it's old. It gets updated probably about once, I don't know, what does the repo say? Whatever the repo says is how long it gets updated. It's not often, and it's usually just kind of like a one giant, we need to update this thing, let's update it all right now, and then we'll touch it again in 6 months. So it's not exactly this like really graceful process by which this repository is maintained. I don't know quite what to do with this repository. I don't know if anybody else has thought about this repository.
I actually did, but not about this particular one. So when we did the badging structure, we thought to ourselves, there's the diversity and inclusion events badge, and then there's the diversity and inclusion project badging, right? So those are two repos. But most people want to go to the, badging/diversity and inclusion and see what badges are there. So it's kind of like an umbrella repo that reflects updates that are happening in other repos and includes common resources for working in other repos. So if you think about it as, if you want to look at CHAOSS metrics, you come here and then you figure out which role you are in the README. Under that role, you're going to find links to go to the places of interest in the organization that are of the particular interest you have for that particular function or role you're coming to the repo with. It could also be a place where you would have issues to propose new metrics that don't necessarily fall under a working group, or to ask a general question about metrics in an issue. So I think with automation, fairly keep this reflective of, updates to all the metric repos. It's obviously not a short-term idea. It's like something you could develop out of this. I think it's important to have kind of like fast lanes for people to come into a project. I've looked at many orgs where they have so many repos that you could group together, and you just give up looking at which repo you want to look into first if you don't know any context. So it's like the context entry for metrics. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Those are good. That's good. I have a question, but any other thoughts on the metrics repo? So one of my things I get told fairly regularly, I mean, I don't know, like a couple times, like once a month. Like I went to the metrics repo and it doesn't make a ton of sense, right? So I'm looking at this long list of metrics, some that have links, some that don't have links, some that have an assignment to a working group. And I'm like, oh yeah, don't look at that. go to the web page and look at. That's where I always send people now for the kind of the canonical list of metrics.
You definitely just reminded me, Matt, of like my first experience when I wanted to contribute is like you see /metrics under the CHAOSS community and you're like, that must be the mono repo. That must be like where everything happens. But really the question, the core question to me is like, what's the front door on GitHub? Because it's super unclear even to a reasonably experienced GitHub user, like where you should start. And in the past, that means like I've made a mono repo, like there's, whatever org/community is kind of my default because it's community oriented. But /metrics, like, yeah, it either needs to be the most up-to-date thing or the metrics have to be deleted and explain what a metric is and what this organization does. Maybe reframing it that way. I don't know, but yeah, something needs to happen where we have a clear front door.
You were probably one of the people that said, I don't know what this this repo is. You're probably one of them.
I might have been, yeah.
That was a great point. And I think that kind of can coincide with what Sala was saying as well. Okay. Other thoughts on this? I have a question, I guess, for working group folks. How often in your working groups do you actually go to the /metrics site to look at like documented metrics that might be useful in your respective working groups? I mean, that was one of the intentions, right? That we would just capture everything there.
I go to the website and look there.
There's one thing I come to the metrics repo for, and that is the metrics template.
Yep.
Because that is the canonical place for the metrics template.
To Sala's point, that we have resources available to get the work done. Yeah, that's the only reason I go there too.
So I think we just need a choreography for it. Like someone would sit down and say, okay, this is the function of this thing. And this is the work that we want to maintain, the workload versus bots that we could use. So we don't have any workload. We just have like bugs to report and issues to chase down. So, I think it's just finding a purpose for the repo, it's sitting.
I'm actually laughing because somebody who posted the wiki.
It was me. I just was reminded of it because someone was pointing me to the wiki last
That's
week,
right.
and I was like,
We used to have a
that
wiki.
still exists?
I forgot about that.
From a historical perspective, CHAOSS started on the wiki, and then we decided it was not very collaborative because you needed special permission. And anyway, so we moved to GitHub to have the GitHub workflow, and that's what created the metrics repo. And then from there, we branched out to have the working group repositories. And so as we are moving and evolving, we're leaving behind these old buildings that are becoming ruins that we need to go back and clean up.
Grief. We should probably just get rid of that, shouldn't we? This wiki page.
Deprecated. Just let people go there and be like, oops, we don't live here anymore.
I would look at whether or not it's providing. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt. Continue. I'm sorry. That's my fault.
Yeah, no, it's me, obviously. Yeah, go ahead.
I would, before you get rid of anything, I would recommend looking at how much link juice the Wikipedia page is providing, because it is a Wikipedia page. That's a lot of ingoing links, that's a lot of capacity, and that's a lot of domain pressure.
Wiki page at Linux Foundation, not Wikipedia.
Oh, wait. So it's not a mainstay Wikipedia page, it's just something that you produced on your own?
It's a wiki at the Linux Foundation.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. But yeah, if we had a Wikipedia page, I wouldn't get rid of that.
Is there any point to moving the wiki content into chaos/somethings/wiki? Because GitHub has... Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Most of it we did move over, and we did reduce the pages in the wiki. I think the only thing that's still there that I never moved out were like meeting minutes from very early meetings. That's the only thing that I would still want to preserve from there.
Do we want to mark down the old meeting minutes into a minutes repo? Just have like markdown files for every, have them serial name somehow?
Well, right now we keep meeting minutes in Google Docs, and we don't have a place. So I don't know if we even need those meeting minutes anymore. We could just, delete.
That's so unlike you to say that.
No.
All right. Well, okay. So I'm just
one question. Can we have a page on the CHAOSS, CHAOSS page on the Wikipedia? There is a small link that there is a CHAOSS project of the Linux Foundation, but no detail about that.
Talking about Wikipedia. Yeah, didn't this just come up on the mailing list, or is that on a different?
Yes, there was a discussion. I'd started this conversation a while ago, and then someone who had more knowledge about Wikipedia said, you should not create your own page. That is frowned upon in Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
And
that is
so,
actually true.
Although that's a problem for open source communities, because who else has in-depth knowledge than the community members? It's not like an organization or a person.
I mean, I think for an organization, it's less of a big deal than for a person.
There is an opportunity, like obviously you can't pay anyone to do anything, but as long as the individual is like a volunteer or a community member that's not actively engaged in like a primary matter with the company, if you encourage people to go onto Wikipedia and like update other general pages just regularly, just share their knowledge from this community and then say, I got it from here. Once enough of that information has been built onto Wikipedia, there becomes a necessity to index where that information is coming from, which usually means a Wikipedia page. So a lot of people have been able to organically build enough reputation on the site for it to necessitate creating a new page, and that's just encouraging the community members to do it. So at Digital Marketer, one of the ways that we conceived of doing it was basically a share your knowledge in Digital Marketer Engage, the Facebook group, we basically just had these campaigns that encouraged them to go out onto Wikipedia pages, make changes and add information based on their expertise. And at a certain point in time, that information kept coming from digital marketer, digital marketer, digital marketer. So a page was eventually conceived of. I don't know if it still exists though, because it's a brand company. So
it's very interesting.
There's one thing about Wikipedia. They keep chasing me every year to donate. They're not doing very well in terms of like they are getting a little bit of a desperate vibe, not like asking me to donate because they're in a good shape and it's a good effort, but rather like nobody's listening, you know, we need money kind of thing. So at least we could start donating and then see if that message changes, then there's hope, and then we can put effort in Wikipedia. I don't know. Is it dying out?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a.
I actually have no idea.
Yeah.
Just,
I mean, I know it's. I mean, it seems to still be surviving. Jimmy Wales is off doing a local news wiki project.
Can I move as we have just two things. A lot of these were new items today, so I'd like to just take 1 second, well, more than a second, but Sala, could you briefly just tell us about the all contributors? This is the second to last item on the agenda. So this is about recognizing all contributors in the CHAOSS project and how we go about doing that. So Sala, are you sharing your screen? Is somebody sharing their screen?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen, and I was talking. I forgot to open the mic before I started sharing my screen.
Okay.
So, yeah. So So I just accidentally tripped on this when I was like looking at one of the projects. So this is a new thing where on GitHub you basically could start like mentioning people, telling the all contributors bot there's like a contributor here who's like not represented in the typical way on a GitHub repo or org. And then they kind of like have kind of a well-structured approach to make sure every contributor is mentioned. And I guess, you know, this is a very, very brief introduction because I've seen it in action. I haven't really went through their docs. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring this to the attention of everyone. I think CHAOSS could use it.
Yeah, so whether this is the solution or not, I would at least like to encourage people to think about how we can recognize all contributors in the CHAOSS project. There are a lot of people doing a lot of great work that aren't necessarily identified. And I don't know how we go about doing that. Like a page like that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think it goes on the README. So if we can look at their README source, it's going to be like something that they embed somehow. Anyways, yeah.
Okay. What was the comment about widgets on the blog?
One of the coolest ways that I found a lot of YouTubers and influencers are recognizing patrons and people who have contributed to their channel is on blog content and in videos. They're like, hey, we're going to add 10 people. So if you add a widget on the blog that just randomly pulls a person, it might be a good way to recognize them in active content.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I think we're getting, clearly the community is getting big enough that it'd be nice to make those types of recognized contributions. So
it is an extrinsic reward though, so maybe think about something to support it. I'm sorry, I'll stop interjecting.
Totally fine. I appreciate it. And then kind of the last thing is just an update for Google Summer of Code and Outreachy. We have made our Outreachy recommendation. Again, Outreachy wants to announce that. So we've made our recommendation to the Outreachy program. And then Google Summer of Code, we've also made our recommendation for the number of mentee requests. So I think we're good, I guess, is the update. Everything seems to be moving fairly well in that regard on both of those efforts. So
So just to verify, I think Outreachy has April 27 as the day. Announcement. Do we know Google Summer Code when the embargo or whatever? Like yeah.
When they approve our
May 4th.
May 4th.
They announce students on May 4th.
They announce the number of slots or the students?
They announced the students on May 4th, as far as I'm reading this.
So,
Student projects announced.
But they have to tell us the slots we have before they can do that. So there must be a step in between.
Yes. So what Solid was asking for is the public announcement.
Okay.
That is what I was answering. Yes, there is a step in between where I think we will know in like 2 days or so.
The number of slots. Okay.
Slot processing is today, and then we will. We have until April 30 to decide how many projects and who we want to mentor. Gotcha. And then they're going to announce it on May 4th.
Gotcha. Cool. Right on.
So we'll probably hear from Google tomorrow about how many slots we got.
Okay. Right on. All right, cool. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Thanks everybody for a lot of these kind of open-ended topics today. Just kind of getting feedback from a lot of people. That was really helpful. So thank you. And we will.
It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Seeing you all.
All right.
And have a good day.
Good seeing everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.